And some of the best ways to improve our immune system is to get 20 to 30 minutes of sunshine or more every day, and eat whole foods. Foods, I'll tell clients, think about things with one ingredient, eggs, turkey, chicken, banana, and not these packaged foods that are made with, tons of inflammatory ingredients that are causing havoc in our gut. And I'll tell people too, if you look at an ingredient list and there's words you can't pronounce, your immune system doesn't recognize those things as food. And the bacteria and the microbes in your gut don't recognize those things as food. And they often even recognize them as invaders and as harmful. And so you're constantly kind of getting this kind of fire going on in the gut. And then what happens long term is your immune system gets a little worn out.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com.
What is the microbiome?
Microbiome is the makeup, or it's an environment that includes the makeup of organisms for and other organisms. So there's the microbiome, and it's made up of viruses, bacteria, parasites, all kinds of microbes. And the human microbiome is basically the complex structure of organisms that makes us human. We have a gut microbiome, a skin microbiome, a brain microbiome, a lung microbiome, even the vaginal microbiome. And it's basically a word that describes the makeup of organisms that live in an environment.
It's kind of crazy to think about, because generally as a human, I just think of myself as James. Like I'm one thing. But the reality is there's like more bacteria in a couple inches of my lower intestine than like all the people of the world ever. It's trillions, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So we know that there's estimates that do estimate trillions. We know that there's at least 10,000 various species of organisms in the gut. Some estimates exceed 35,000. But when you think about the genetic makeup of that species, then you're getting to the trillions of genes, because basically the gene makeup of these microorganisms outnumber ours like 360 to 1. So we are much more, if you think about it from a cellular standpoint, microorganisms than we are even human. And it's interesting, you say that. I remember when I first started learning about the gut microbiome years ago, and I was fascinated to learn that we really are just this complex makeup of organisms that really work together or don't work together to make us healthy or not healthy. And the interplay of these bacteria and viruses and fungi and whatnot that really do create either a symbiotic relationship or a destructive relationship. And it's really interesting to think about it like that we really are, basically a walking, talking organism made up of hundreds of thousands of other microorganisms. So, and we have really no idea. I mean, we're just learning about the makeup of the microbiome and which bacteria are good and which bacteria are, quote, bad, and which ones do different things. And so we're just at the very tip of the iceberg, and just a fascinating aspect of our medical literature and science and research. And I'm really looking forward to what we learn. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about how, and something else that was just so interesting to me is these microorganisms preceded human existence on Earth. And, they've really been on Earth millions of billions of years, whereas human beings, maybe 300,000 years or so. And so we really almost came from them in one way. And so it's really interesting to think about that, or you think about like a single cell that humans we all start as single cell organisms, and then we become this human, and the gut and the brain and how they're related and connected, and how they share different organisms. It's all just really fascinating. Super excited to get more into this today with you.
It's crazy stuff. Like it's super crazy to think of. And then,
especially because we can't see them,
Sure.
I mean, and they're so tiny. I actually was reading something the other day, and it said if you were to take all the microorganisms in the human body and put them together, it would fill about a gallon bucket, depending on the size of the human, like a half a gallon to a gallon. So you think, wow, like they're microscopic, you can't see them, but if we pulled them all together, that's what basically the space they would take up. So it's kind of interesting to think about it like that too.
And without them, we die.
Without them, we die. And without their working together in like a symbiotic relationship, we die slowly. If you think about it, I mean, we now know that up to 90% of our diseases are from this dysbiosis or imbalance or problems in the gut. And we also see that healing the gut, I see it with my clients all the time, healing the gut heals the problem, whether it's a physical manifestation like even chronic pain or digestive distress, or a more emotional thing like anxiety and depression. We really do see that so many of our common but not normal conditions that so many of us suffer from today really originate as a function of the gut biome being disrupted or inflamed. And it's kind of interesting to think about it like that. But the good news is there's ways to fix it. We don't have to stay sick, and we also can heal the gut just as we can make it just as we can harm it, we can heal it. So it's exciting to think about that too. There's hope.
So what do these microbiota do for us?
Oh, they do a lot. So one of the main things they do is they basically instruct the immune system. So about 70 to 80% of our immune system resides in the gut. It's actually in a place right above the gut called the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, the GALT or GALT. And you can almost imagine they sit there like little bodyguards waiting on something to invade the body. And so when real foods come through, like eggs and meat and vegetables and fruits and things that we're used to eating, more or less for the most part, they're just kind of like, okay, that can come on through. But when we're exposed to other harmful viruses or things in our food that aren't real food, or they're not used to being exposed to, they think of these as invaders. And so they like launch, this is obviously like, picturesque, but they launch this attack in the gut to fight these bad guys off. And so they are making our immune system function. They are helping our enzymes to do what they're supposed to do. They're helping our brain function. A lot of them, even when we think about like babies being born, a baby that passes through the mother's vaginal canal is inoculated with her bacteria and her biome there. And we now know that when we look at the colonization of bacteria on babies born vaginally, it mimics the mom. Where babies born via C-section, it mimics more like what's on our skin. So you see a lot more even harmful bacteria like staph infection. So like it can even give us instructions for, here's this, milk that's coming to you in a few minutes, and this is how you're supposed to digest it and utilize it, or it sets us up to fight off other infections. It also is going to help us regulate weight and metabolism of food. So we know that there are different kinds of bacteria that, for example, Firmicutes are like a fat-loving bacteria. And over time, they've become more common in the Western civilization, and they are much better at utilizing energy from food. So if you think about this is going to make people more likely to be overweight or obese because they're really good at extracting energy from food. Whereas when you have less of that makeup, you tend to be more lean and more, I don't want to say fit, but more healthy. They also help produce and release important enzymes that are in substances that collaborate with our biology, as well as certain chemicals for the brain, including vitamins and neurotransmitters. So something else really fascinating is that 90% of serotonin is actually made by the cells in the gut. And so when we get this dysbiosis or inflammation going on in the gut, it disrupts that balance and makeup of the serotonin, which then creates an imbalance of these neurotransmitters. And so we think of diseases or conditions like anxiety and depression as brain disorders. But what we're learning is the manifestation and the etiology is often originating in the gut. And the gut and the brain are connected via the vagus nerve. They are from the central and enteral nervous systems are from the same tissue when when the baby being born or when the baby being formed in the womb. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you get bad news, where do you feel it?
Yeah, in your stomach.
Feel in your gut, right? Or you think about that gut instinct. And so we really have been thinking about these brain conditions, quote unquote, but they really are often originating from the gut. They also assist with us getting a good night's sleep, and they control the body's inflammatory pathways, which are going to affect our risk or reduce our risk for certain diseases. A lot of chronic diseases we know are related to this inflammation or dysbiosis in the gut. And they also act as a detoxification machine. So we know they help in some of the detoxification pathways. And then they quite literally form a barrier in the gut to protect us. So there's been some evidence to show that there are certain of these bacteria that have little swimmer, like flagella or like little tentacles on them that help them swim. And they quite literally like fight viruses in their tracks, particularly harmful rotaviruses that can be even deadly. And then they're going to aid in the absorption of nutrients. So that's a super important one, that we know that the presence or absence of certain bacterial species helps us to absorb food better or not absorb food well at all. And we also know that it's really important to have incredible diversity. We see that when we start to see a reduction in the diversity of these microbes, we'd see the onset of more disease and things like obesity and overweight and diabetes. And it makes sense because, kind of a trivia question for you, what do you think are the three most commonly consumed foods in America?
Oh, I would think something to do with corn, something to do with soybeans, and something to do with cane sugar.
That is, you got 2 out of 3 spot on, and I'm sure sugar is probably the fourth, but it's corn, wheat, and soybeans. And so if we think about that, we've pretty much become a tri-crop society. And the problem with that is, for people that are eating a standard American diet, they're eating the majority of their calories from corn, soy, and wheat. And so they just don't have a lot of diversity in what they're consuming. And so we quite literally are what we eat. And the makeup of the bacteria in the gut is going to be based on our diet. And our diet is the number one most influential factor on the makeup of the gut. And we know that it's really important to think about even our own makeup and having that diversity of what we need to eat to increase that bacterial diversity there. So good guess. That was quite spot on. Okay.
What does serotonin do for me?
Serotonin is what we think of like the feel-good neurotransmitter. So it's going to help you. It's going to help mood regulation. It's going to help bring those feelings of happiness, joy. It even can be associated with like calmness, some parasympathetic nervous system activity. So it tends to kind of be that balancer across the board. But we really think of it as like, our happy neurotransmitter, what makes us feel good, have good mood states, have balanced mood state. Without, when serotonin's balanced and dopamine, they kind of work together, we typically don't see that mood swing and that dysregulation in mood state that we see when you've got a lot of neurotransmitter imbalance.
Some of the happiest and most energetic and healthiest people I know are also those who consume the most fermented foods. And like I use like my buddies, Brad Leone from It's Alive with Brad. Everybody knows Brad. And in Eli Cairo, who does fermented meat at Olympia Provisions. Both these guys consume a lot of fermented foods, and like they're just incredible humans. And I think that those things go together. And I see that in lots of other cases, people that eat a lot of sauerkraut or people that drink a lot of kombucha or, various things, it seems to do something really positive for them. So consuming these fermented type foods, what does that do for your microbiome?
Yeah, for sure. So when we consume these fermented foods, some other great ones like pickled foods, pickled cabbage, pickled onions, you mentioned kombucha, even things like kefir, what it does is it basically acts as a superfood for the bacteria in the gut, and it's going to help repopulate. So I always tell clients after they've been on a round of antibiotics, I recommend a probiotic while they're taking it or 30 days after. But the research on probiotics is a little unclear. I mean, some says it's great, some says it's not great. And so I'm just not really comfortable making a professional, statement one way or the other. I like to take people individually, but the one thing we can say for everybody is yes, the consumption of these fermented foods is absolutely going to feed and fuel those healthy gut flora and help to repopulate that gut flora that's there as well. And it's really important to think about that in combination with removing the foods that we know to be inflammatory. So I don't know, but I'm assuming these people that you're talking about probably eat a pretty healthy diet and aren't, living off the standard American diets of wheat, corn, and soy and, fast food and things like that. Because we do see that, there's a huge relationship between the inflammation pathways in the gut and then how it manifests as disease in the body. And I would love, if anything, the listeners take away from today is that we really have the power to change our whole health by changing what's on our plate. One of my favorite things to say is one of the most powerful tools we have to improve our health is our fork. And it's so true because we think about the choices that we make every day. We have choices all throughout our day to what we put in our body and what we fuel our body. And when we're eating inflammatory foods, and it's different for everybody. Like personally, I have sensitivities to gluten and soy. Most of us do have sensitivities to, not to say most, the majority of us do have sensitivities to gluten, especially because of the way it damages the lining of the gut. Do you know how thick the cell lining of the gut is?
I mean, yeah, who doesn't know that? I mean, I could tell you, but I don't want to show off.
Yeah. It's about a single hair. It's one cell thick. Hair. So okay. It's pretty thin, right? It can be damaged quite easily. And so you get over time, things like gluten damage the lining of the gut. And so gluten's not necessarily directly causing these things, but it's indirectly causing a lot of things. Obviously celiac, but then you have asymptomatic celiac disease, anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism, even type 1 diabetes. Can be related to this, damage in the gut, primarily due to things like gluten, sugar. But what happens is you get leaky gut. Literally, the gut lining becomes inflamed or porous and leaky, and so you get things out into the blood system and into our body, into the bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there. One thing we know is like bacterial endotoxin, which is a normal, expected waste product of having bacteria, but it's not supposed to get into our bloodstream, right? But it gets there and then it causes inflammation. And then over time, this causes widespread inflammation throughout the body, and it manifests differently for everybody. If I had 10 clients in the room right now and I said, tell me what your biggest goal is right now with your health, they would all say something different, but 9 out of 10 would at their root be related to this inflammation and to something going on in the gut, either actual leaky gut and damage to the gut lining, or just a dysbiosis of the bacteria in the gut. And so we really have to go back to changing what we eat. But the good news is in literally 1 week's time, you can change the makeup of bacteria in the gut quite drastically. And the cells of our gut, the cells of our mouth, if you think about it, if you ever bit the side of your mouth, it heals like in a day. And so there's rapid turnover of that cell's lifespan. And same thing with the gut. So even though the cells are damaged, the good news is they're regenerating themselves quite frequently, quite often. So there's enormous capacity for healing. And I'll often see this in clients, they may have a sensitivity to even like certain vegetables, but once we get the gut cleaned up and repaired, then they can reintroduce those things. Or for someone that has a gluten sensitivity, I'm a good example of that. I took it out strictly for like 6 months, and now I can have it every now and then without a problem. But if I get lazy about it, I start getting those same symptoms, anxiety, sinus congestion, trouble sleeping, things like that. But once you repair the gut, you can tolerate it. It's like you have a certain tolerance for these foods again. But when we're eating them all day, every day, I was eating, whole grain cereal for breakfast, thinking that was really healthy. And then a sandwich on whole grain bread for lunch. And, it was just like, I had no idea really all this, gluten intake and what it was doing to my body. And finally, through a lot of studying, a lot of testing, realized that might be one of the things that was triggering for me. And once I figured that out for myself, I was like, I've got to learn about this more. I'm committing my life to this. I have to help more people. And literally went back to school to study nutrition again and become a registered dietitian, so I could really take this and add it to what I was already doing in the health field with patients and public health. So it's been an interesting journey. But the microbiome and inflammation in our immune system are quite extraordinary topics to be talking about. And I think it's really important, coming off the heels of COVID, for us all to be thinking about, what are some of the ways that I can improve my immune system? And some of the best ways to improve our immune system is to get 20 to 30 minutes of sunshine or more every day, and eat whole foods. Foods, I'll tell clients, think about things with one ingredient, eggs, turkey, chicken, banana, and not these packaged foods that are made with, tons of inflammatory ingredients that are causing havoc in our gut. And I'll tell people too, if you look at an ingredient list and there's words you can't pronounce, your immune system doesn't recognize those things as food. And the bacteria and the microbes in your gut don't recognize those things as food. And they often even recognize them as invaders and as harmful. And so you're constantly kind of getting this kind of fire going on in the gut. And then what happens long term is your immune system gets a little worn out, and kind of putting it simply, like it's constantly in the gut fighting these fires because of the foods that we're eating. And so then when it's time to actually you need it somewhere else in the body, then it's kind of worn out and tired, and you get this manifestation of other inflammatory pathways in the body. So it's kind of interesting to think about it like that too, in terms of the interplay of the guts are literally driving the presence or absence of disease states in the body, or conditions like anxiety and depression.
So kind of the easy button for this would be like the barcode diet. Like if it has a barcode on it, don't eat it, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, pretty much. So I heard a doctor say not too long ago, I tell my patients to stay away from carbs that come with barcodes. And it's so true, and obviously like everything comes with the barcode now in the grocery store, but yeah, generally speaking, if it doesn't come in a package, that is going to be good for you. But again, everybody's different. I literally have clients who thrive as carnivores. I have clients that thrive as vegetarians, and I have clients that thrive in between. And also there's a time and a place for everything. You can sometimes see people do really well on a pretty much meat-based diet to heal something, whether it's like an autoimmune condition or a thyroid thing. And then once that's healed, they can kind of go back to more of a normal way of eating. Or I'll see a lot of times, I specialize with diabetes and blood sugar control. Most of my clients have diabetes or pre-diabetes or some form of metabolic syndrome. And we might put them on a ketogenic or a low carbohydrate diet for a couple of months, or maybe even up to 3 to 6 months, just depending on the person, to get that A1C out of glucose toxicity. I get referrals all the time. It's nothing for me to see A1Cs of 12 and 13 where we are in Mississippi, which for your listeners that don't know, that's blood sugars in the 500 and 600 range. And we want them like around 100. So it's very high. And, it's important to get those blood sugars down. So we cut carbohydrates really low. And then down the road, they may have the metabolic flexibility to add them back in. So, we don't, just because we adopt a diet for a little while, in my professional opinion, doesn't mean we have to stick to it forever. It may have a time and a place for us.
What role does hydration have in all this?
Oh man, hydration is so important. That's literally the first thing and making sure that you're properly hydrated, especially first thing in the morning. Our body's majority water, and it's hard for us to think about that because we can't see the water in our body. But, if you think about our brain and our organs and our kidneys, everything needs water to basically cause all of the things in the body that need to happen every day. We see dehydration associated with a number of things, even things like heart attack. We often see as a result of dehydration. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors playing into that, but they can happen early in the morning when we haven't been hydrated all night long. But hydration is important. It's key. And not only just plain water, but I'll tell people too, if you're active, or for you guys that are out, camping and in the mountains and hiking and doing stuff like that, even to consider an electrolyte supplement to your water. So something like, I like Redmond's Real Salt Electrolyte Mix, or LMNT is another company, but it's basically a real clean blend of magnesium, potassium, and sodium that it's kind of salty, but it's good when it's cool, and it can help replenish and balance out those electrolytes. But yeah, hydration is so key, and it's important for a lot of things. And you even don't know, I'll tell clients too, if you get tired in the afternoon, or you're kind of starting to feel brain fog, it could be they're dehydrated. So just drink a big glass of water and see if that doesn't help you a little bit with your energy and ability to focus, or that brain fog. They always say, if by the time you feel thirsty, you're already way dehydrated. Yeah. And another thing I'll tell people is that, you really want your urine to be a pale yellow, like lighter than lemonade. And if my soccer coach used to tell us this in college, if your urine is any darker than pale lemonade, you're dehydrated. And so that's just kind of another good way to know if you're properly hydrated.
I never get thirsty. I don't know if I've ever felt thirsty in my life. So if I drink water, it's because I've made a cognitive decision to drink water. My body's just a jerk to me like that. That's
interesting.
And I think that a lot of people experience that. I talk to a lot of people that, just don't drink enough water, and they recognize that, but, they don't really get compelled to drink water. Their body doesn't tell them to. And I think a lot of people, myself included, mistake thirst for hunger. So I'll be eating something when really I should just be drinking some water. Mm-hmm. Have you been around the liquid IV little packages? I love those things. Have you seen those?
I haven't.
Yeah. They're a pretty kick-ass little electrolyte thing. I don't know if there's like good stuff or bad stuff in them or not, but they certainly make a guy feel a lot better when you drink it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's hydration. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what qualifies you to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. So my name is Catherine Mooring. I went to college thinking I was going to go to medical school, and shadowed a few doctors, and kind of realized that there was general physicians, internists. And I realized, gosh, these doctors are writing a lot of prescriptions, and I just don't really see them helping people. And so I went back to college, and I was like, I don't think I want to do medicine anymore, but I really don't know what I want to do. And so I was kind of looking through all my transcript hours, and thought, okay, this lines up with this. And long story short, I said, okay, I'm going to get a major in exercise science. Loved exercise. I could get into like sports medicine, something cool like that. So I ended up with an undergraduate degree in exercise science, went on to get a master's degree in health promotion, which is similar to public health. Had an opportunity to stay at the University of Mississippi and do my PhD in health and kinesiology. So I have a doctorate in health and kinesiology with my emphasis in health behavior. So I have a lot of training in human behavior change, health behavior models, psychology, nutrition, a lot of science. And after I graduated, I started a wellness center, a hospital and community wellness center in the Mississippi Delta, which is a very low income, high chronic disease area. The health status here really mirrors that of developing countries. And so we've done a lot of work here around chronic disease prevention, treatment, management. We opened that up in 2016, and we're just kind of rocking and rolling and doing some really great things. And then COVID hit. So we had to really pivot and started thinking about, how we can still see patients online. So my business partner and I started an online diabetes self-management and nutrition coaching program that's virtual. We're currently serving 10 counties in Mississippi. We have about $1 million of federal grant funding I got last year to pilot the project to kind of see where it'll go. And then I kind of mentioned earlier, I went back to school in 2018 and did a registered dietitian internship and to become a registered dietitian. So I'm a registered dietitian, licensed dietitian. I am also a certified diabetes care and education specialist, and I'm board certified in advanced diabetes management. I'm an advanced Whole30 coach. I'm a big fan of Whole30. I think that's a great tool to find out your food sensitivities and figure out which foods are working for you and which foods are not, both emotionally and physically. And I'm a mom. I have a little 18-month-old baby. I have 2 stepsons, 2 bonus sons. A great husband who loves the outdoors, manages land and wildlife for a living. And now I also have a private practice. So again, post-COVID, I kind of started thinking about, well, I also had a baby in the middle of the pandemic. So I should say it wasn't really COVID, it was really more her and my thinking about, what could I do? What is like, my real passion? And I love helping people. I've loved our diabetes program now being virtual. We're having some really cool outcomes with that. Really on the verge of growing that program pretty remarkably, which I'm excited about. But then also I wanted to, I get all the time people reaching out to me either through the Whole30 website or friends, or just they find me online and want to work together. And I have a real heart for women, especially women postpartum. I had a baby at 36. So that kind of advanced maternal age, motherhood journey of nutrition and all the things that come with that. Postpartum, breastfeeding. I'm a huge advocate for breastfeeding. I think it's, obviously one of the best things we can do. Obviously fed is best. However you decide to feed your baby is definitely best, but there's something really special and great about breastfeeding for women who choose to do it, or for people who choose to do it. And I am also now I have a private practice, so I can see patients virtually all over the country. I also specialize in eating disorders, disordered eating. So I have a real heart for that. I myself am about 10 years in recovery from about a decade-long eating disorder, fought the good fight, understand how challenging that world can be. Eating disorders are arguably the most challenging addictions to overcome, because you can't just stop eating, right? You just can, you're not supposed to, you stop drinking or you stop using drugs, but with food, you have to really learn to find a healthy relationship with food. And I love helping people find that freedom and finding that food freedom and healthy relationship. And, even in my clients that I work with that have obesity or overweight or diabetes, there's often a little bit of that where we talk about, where people use food as comfort, or people use food as something other than to fuel a physical hunger. So we use food to comfort when we're upset, when we're sad, when we're lonely, when we're frustrated, when we're bored. So I love working in that realm. And then I also just have a normal, if you just need to lose weight or you just want to improve your anxiety or depression, that's kind of my other I love working with people with anxiety and depression, because often we can, if not even eliminate it, we can improve it drastically by changes in diet. So
Back to the microbiome, and that is all, I should say, extremely impressive, by the way. That is a gargantuan amount of learning and then putting it to use. And those two things don't always occur together. There's a lot of very learned people that just kind of stay in academia, and then that knowledge doesn't make it to the street. So good on you for everything that you've done and continue to do. But back to the microbiome.
Yeah, let's do it. That's my favorite subject.
I have heard that the microbiota have a lot to do with controlling urges and compulsions. Is that accurate?
I think so. I mean, like I said, we're learning so much about their makeup and what they do and who they are, and literally the tens of thousands of different species of them. But it does seem that the way they interplay with our hunger hormones and which obviously are in the gut as well, that they can trigger cravings or not, people that don't really experience as much craving. Something interesting, we know after weight loss surgery, the way that it impacts the gut hormones and even the bacteria, most likely, you can see reduced cravings in people after that. Or if somebody gets put on like a DPP-4 or a GLP-1, which are diabetes drugs, we do see that impacts changes in appetite. And, we're still learning it, but what we're thinking is that not only does it impact the gut hormones, but it's also impacting that bacterial makeup and how those bacteria talk to each other, literally, like communicate with each other and communicate with our hormones, and even send signals to the hormones to do what they're supposed to do. But I do think that I can't say for sure. We just don't know yet from what I've read in the research, but it seems very likely.
So if somebody books you and becomes one of your clients, how does that go? I mean, obviously, like, they're coming to you for a reason and they have specific goals. But like, how do you even start helping somebody, change their life through changing their microbiome and their eating habits remotely? That seems like a big challenge.
Yeah. It's always a challenge no matter what when you're talking about food, because we have been developing our dietary patterns with food since we were infants, and food is very, near and dear to everybody. And we all have our different cultural beliefs and cultural preferences about food. And it's just one of those things that it can be associated with that addictive nature, like I said. And so we know that things like wheat and sugar are truly addictive. Gluten, I was just reading a paper about this morning, actually, but gluten binds to similar receptors in the brain as opioids. And so it's truly addicting. And it also is associated, we think, with some of the asymptomatic celiac disease. The reason why it's asymptomatic possibly is because of these opioid-like reactions that gluten has in the body that would obviously be like a pain, reducing pain. So a lot to be learned there. Still in the very exploratory stages of science there. But so typically what I do, there's always exceptions, but I like to people commit to 12 weeks. But the exception of that to my Whole30 coaching, it's 10 weeks. And that's because Whole30 is 30. Are you familiar with Whole30? Should I maybe give just a quick rundown of it for your listeners? Or
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people struggle through it, and I've maybe not been the most supportive and helpful friend while they're doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk me through Whole30.
I'll just give you like a super quick rundown. So Whole30, yes, and that's so funny. It's so funny that you say that, because the first time my sister suggested that we do Whole30, I was like, I'm not doing that. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life, and I don't think it's necessary. But that was pre my learning about gluten and grains and soy and all the inflammation and all the microbiome stuff. So that was probably 10 or 12 years ago, right when Whole30 came out. So Whole30 is a 30-day nutritional reset designed to identify food sensitivities and reset your relationship with food. So what we do for 30 days is you eliminate grains, legumes, sugar, dairy, and alcohol. And we eat, for people there's actually a plant-based Whole30 now too. It's a little bit of different rules, but and then you eat, like I was saying earlier, single foods, vegetables, fruits, meats, fish, nuts, seeds, things like that, for 30 days. And what we do is we really methodically slowly reintroduce them back in a certain way to see how your body responds, both physically and emotionally. And then over time, we also work on it in terms of food freedom. So we work toward understanding like when foods are worth it and when they're not, so like, are there certain foods that you tend to eat that you just can't stop eating? And maybe that's not the best decision for you, for a food to choose all the time. And so we talk a lot about that. But so that program is 10 weeks, but typically like for clients to commit to 12. And we talk weekly over Zoom, and they can be in touch via text or Marco Polo or email as well. And the first few sessions are really just kind of me understanding more of, or the first session or two, their background, their history, what their goals are, if they've ever tried to lose weight in the past, or they've ever tried to change their diet in the past, or just whatever it is they're coming to me with. If it's anxiety or depression, we talk about what else have they done to try to help these conditions. And then we work to establish a plan of action. So a lot of times it does involve looking at what are their food sensitivities. I may order labs. I may recommend food sensitivity tests. It just really depends on the person. And then over the 12 weeks, we work together and try to get them to where they have a diet that works for them. My goal always with clients is to have the least restrictive diet possible. So I don't want people to walk away from our coaching thinking they can never eat anything, right? There's a time and a place. If you go to a birthday party, you want to have birthday cake. If you go to a wedding, you want to have wedding cake. If you, you're home for the holidays, there's certain probably foods that you look forward to having. And so we learn to enjoy that in the moment, but then most of the time eat foods that we know are going to fuel our body well. And I like to tell clients too, every time we make a decision around food, we are either moving closer to health and moving more toward our goals, or we're moving closer toward disease. And food really is our greatest form of medicine, or it's the slow form of poison. And I've seen food outwork pharmaceutical medications 10 to 1 over and over and over and over and over again in my practice. And this is especially when you think about things like anxiety and depression and diabetes. I've had clients come to me on literally every class of diabetes drug almost on the market, and their A1C is still 10 or 11. And we change diet. With that, it's going to be a carbohydrate restriction. And in 6 months, their A1C is 5 or 6. No pharmaceutical medication is going to do that. And my heart and passion are really with diabetes, because so many people are suffering unnecessarily, and other conditions. I mean, I have so many friends and colleagues and acquaintances that are all just relying too much on prescription medication, and they just don't feel good. They don't have good energy. They're not sleeping good. They have brain fog, headaches, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, you name it. And I always say, we can change this. Like, why live another day? I said this to you. Why live another day not feeling your best when you have the tools to do that? And I think it's great to have a coach beside you, because a lot of people need that encouragement. They need that accountability. They need for somebody out there, like, checking in on them. How's it going? And offering suggestions. Like when I got a client that we're trying to figure out if there's a gluten sensitivity, I can't just tell them don't eat bread, right? I've got to give them a lot of advice of what things they can eat. What can they do instead of that sandwich they were eating every day for lunch, or that bowl of cereal they were having every morning? So those are just some things I love to do with clients, and for people to really understand that food is our greatest form of medicine, can be our greatest form of medicine when it's used appropriately. And when we're eating what we're designed to eat for our bodies. And it's not the same for everybody. And like I said, people ask me all the time, what do you think about carnivore? What do you think about plant-based? What do you think about keto? What do you think about? And I always say, I think they could all have a time and a place for that individual, right? But we are all very different. Like a 200-pound male in his 40s has very different nutritional needs than a 130-pound female in her 70s, or a teenager, or even race and ethnicity can play into this. So I always take every client as the individual. I never give like a set, this is what Catherine Mooring recommends for, nutrition or a diet. And the number one thing we need to all understand is if I were to sit here and rattle off 1,000 diets, or, 100 diets that we're all familiar with, the number one thing they all have in common is they remove the ultra processed food. It's estimated up to 70% of our diets, and some of us are from ultra processed food. So our body's just not getting the nutritional needs met. And how many pounds of sugar do you think the average American consumes in a year of added sugar? Not just naturally occurring sugar in grains and fruit, but how many pounds of added sugar is it estimated that Americans consume in a year?
70 pounds.
70 pounds. You're right on the money today. That's true. So and think about that. That is like, a lot of sugar. It's 175 grams of sugar a day. I actually was thinking about this the other day, could that actually be true? And I started looking at sugar. I'm like, a Coke. Well, yeah, a 20-ounce Coke has 65 grams of sugar, and a 12-ounce Coke or a 12-ounce glass of juice has more sugar than we need in a whole day. A bowl of cereal, has as much sugar as we need in a whole day. So just foods that we're used to eating that we just don't realize are full of sugar, and are going back to the microbiome, are destroying the gut flora. Sugar is arguably the number one worst thing for our immune system. Cancer thrives on it. Did you know that, like, when you go get a PET scan, if you have cancer, the thing that like makes the cancer glow is like a glucose
Really?
substance? Yeah, because the cancer are like, whoa, there's sugar, and they light up like a Christmas tree.
The sugar tastes good. It's exciting to eat sugar.
It is. It is so exciting. It totally gives you a dopamine hit for sure. For most people, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that in the natural world, sugar is rare. It occurs in seasonal fruits and seasonal berries, and that's kind of about it. Mm-hmm. At least in quantities that we would consider sweet. And it's instant energy. And I think that there's probably a reason that we get excited about it, because it was such an uncommon thing throughout most of human history. But now, because we produce so much sugar primarily from corn, it's in everything. Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point that you make. And if you think about sugar or sucrose, the molecule of sucrose, it's one glucose, one fructose. And fructose is the real problem there, because fructose is only metabolized by the liver. And fructose, and I'm not necessarily talking about the fructose that's naturally occurring in fruit. That's, not unless you're just eating like 20 pieces of fruit a day, but I'm talking about like high fructose corn syrup, or the fructose that comes from the sugar molecule. And then what happens over time is fructose consumption is the number one driver of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And when we think about fructose in large quantities, it actually is associated with fat storage because of how it elevates uric acid. And kind of, you'll probably like this analogy, thinking back to hunter and gatherer times, or even before that, we only had fructose available in the fall when it would grow on the trees and it fell onto the ground for us, and we ate fruit in preparation for winter, to put on extra weight and to gain fat storage for the winter when food was going to be scarce. Well, nowadays you can get fruit year round at the grocery stores, and you can get it's, like I said, that's not really the main driver here of the problem. The main driver of the fructose problem is sugar, because of the fructose molecule and non-naturally occurring sugar, and then the high fructose corn syrup. But yeah, it's a real problem, and we're seeing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease even in children. We're seeing tons of type 2 diabetes in children. It's just really sad. Even ADHD and ADD, not to interrupt you, but I feel like, I often hear all the time from people about children with ADD and ADHD. And a lot of times I'll have clients, and the first thing we'll do is I'll say, what do your children eat for breakfast? Pop-Tart, granola bars, cereal. Well, that's 30, 40, 60, 80, even maybe 100 grams of sugar first thing in the morning. And so that's just, we need to be thinking about what we're fueling our body with and our children's bodies. And do we really have I'm not saying those things don't exist. I think that they do exist. But I think sometimes, often, and many people, if we look at the consumption of our food, we would see improvements in conditions like that, if not a complete healing of them. I've seen it in myself. I mean, I was diagnosed with ADD as a teenager, and, anxiety, and I was given 8+ prescription medications over the years, antibiotics and birth control for acne, something for sleep, something for anxiety, something for focusing. And, then I, started having sinus infections, got an allergy. So it was like, I had all these medications. Not one doctor ever asked me anything about my diet, not even the GI doctor when I went for something going on with my stomach once. So now, looking back in hindsight, I realized literally two things. For me, gluten and soy were driving all of those inflammatory pathways. And now I don't have any of that stuff. And I will say the dairy thing with the acne, I do find that a lot of clients, and even in myself, if I eat too much dairy or sugar, I do see skin issues, whether it's acne, psoriasis, eczema. That's a really common manifestation of a skin sensitivity. As a dairy sensitivity is some kind of a skin manifestation of the inflammation.
I wanted to ask about alcohol, because it's an interesting one, because we don't get energy from it, but it's a calorie.
We actually do. Yeah, we actually do get energy from it.
We do.
Is it 7? So there's 7 calories per gram of alcohol. Yeah, we don't get energy from it like we do carbohydrates necessarily, but it is a form of energy, and it's stored. It can be stored as energy for sure.
Okay.
It's not essential nutrient. It doesn't have the functions in the body, like when we think about why we need protein or why we need fat. But it can be used for energy when we consume it.
Okay. So how do you go about drinking in a healthy way?
How do you go about drinking in a healthy way? Moderately. I think, anything we do on a regular or daily, super daily basis like that can have problems, but red wine seems to be have some beneficial properties because of the resveratrol. There's a company called Dry Farm Wines that makes a really clean wine that's got, all kind of good ingredients that a lot of people I follow on the kind of health world drink that wine. I would say, if you're drinking liquors, just don't mix your liquors with sugary beverages, like do water and a lemon or a lime. Like I've started drinking like a gin with lime and mixed with water, maybe like a, sparkling water, something like that. But, I think there's a time and a place for it. Obviously it's a toxin. It does inhibit the liver's ability to, or it inhibits blood sugar. It's going to raise your blood sugar most likely initially, and then it's going to lower your blood sugar later on in the night. So actually, like alcoholics kind of usually have low A1Cs for this reason. It inhibits gluconeogenesis in the liver, which basically that means the liver's ability to store and release sugar into the bloodstream overnight. So it's inhibiting that ability to do that. So you get low blood sugars overnight. But that's a tough one, I think, because again, everybody responds differently to it, and I think people who are drinking every now and then, you're probably not doing too much wrong, but we do see it associated with some cancers. But I would say staying clear liquors, typically better than colored, than brown, than dark liquor. And now there's a lot of things on the market that we used to, my friends and my girlfriends and I were like, where were these wine coolers when we were in college? Like all we had was, like, I don't know, I don't even remember some of the names of them, but like Smirnoff Ice, maybe. Now they have like High Noons and Cat Head vodkas, like cleaner drinks that don't have a lot of sugar, that you can have a couple drinks and enjoy your time with your friends and not just have loads of sugar or loads of liquor in your body. So things like that might be helpful. But I would say with anything though, when you're feeling like you're doing something in excess, kind of take a look internally and ask yourself, what is it? Why are you doing those things? And is it something that's a social thing that you're enjoying every now and then, or is it something you're doing daily? And is there another habit that you can do instead? And just personally, like years ago, I was in graduate school and in college, and I spent 11 years in college. So I had a long time to get into bad habits of like going out and being social. But when I got out of school, it was like, I really don't need to be drinking every night now, but I was used to having a drink with my, my boyfriend or my partner or my friends. And so now it's like, I'll just drink some sparkling water or some kombucha or something that's still having a drink, quote unquote, but it's not an alcohol drink, but it's still like an opportunity to sit down, decompress, talk about our day, maybe sit on the back porch, but it doesn't necessarily have to have alcohol in it anymore. But it's kind of like, you got to have a behavior to replace the behavior. The behavior you're trying to stop is always going to continue.
Okay.
And it's not good for the microbiome. We do know that, particularly an overabundance of alcohol can be detrimental to that gut flora and that gut balance.
Yeah, but that's outside of the moderation spectrum. And
yeah,
we're all pretty clear what happens when you drink too much, that it's not necessarily good. It doesn't make us feel good.
Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you and enlist your services, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I just started a new Instagram account. I am at Dr. Catherine Mooring, at Dr. Catherine Mooring. I'm also, my website should be live any day now. I'm wrapping up some finishing touches on that. It's going to be www.catherinemooring.com. So CATHERINEMORING.com. And I am going to have some different coaching packages available for private practice. But now, before the website's live, people can reach me on Instagram, by email, drdrcatherinemooring@gmail.com. That's about all the places. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Dr. Catherine Mooring. Just kind of getting into all that. Like I said, so I've been wanting to do this for so long, the Instagram stuff, because I feel like I love learning and I love sharing what I'm learning. And I feel like what we're taught, even all the things I was taught in school about nutrition isn't necessarily in line with the new science. And I've read this several areas where when we have some new finding come out in science or in research, it takes 17 years for it to get in textbooks usually. Well, that's way too long when we're talking about health and medicine and nutrition. So
it's a generation.
Yeah. And so we just have a lot of, and nutrition's been such a confusing field, eat eggs, don't eat eggs, eat fat, don't eat fat. And so it's been confusing for everybody, especially us as practitioners. We have to think about people as individuals, and fats are really, healthy fats are one of the most important nutrients that we need to eat. And so that's something else I harp on. I lived through the 90s where I was afraid of fat. Everybody was afraid of fat. Fat was bad. Fat was going to make you fat. Fat was going to make you sick. And that was probably the worst dietary advice we were ever given, because we actually do need quite a bit, especially women, really good healthy fats. And we used to think about it, because it had more calories per gram, but really we're learning that even though it has more calories per gram, the way the body metabolizes fat is so different. It has very little impact on blood sugar, so therefore very little impact on insulin. And it's really the over consumption of processed refined carbohydrates that are leading to kind of back to gluten, soy, and corn. Those, when we consume them, are processed and refined carbohydrates for the most part. So, or soybean oil, is a processed oil, which is super inflammatory. So that's where they can find me. And I'm having fun with the account. I just started it like a month ago and excited to get private practice started. So I've been, working for a hospital full time for 6 years and kind of getting my foot into the private practice world, and just excited to grow it and help more people and really just help people feel better. I think I feel like I have clients say to me all the time, I had no idea how bad I was feeling. Because you don't just like wake up one day and feel bad. It's over time, you just start feeling not your best. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, something's got to give. And then when you start to clean up the diet and other lifestyle stuff, it's not just diet related. That's a big piece of it for sure. But we also talk about stress and sleep, and offer a lot of other, my background in health behavior and health promotion. I have a lot of training in other modalities to work on stress and sleep and all that kind of stuff as well. So just trying to help people learn how to take care of themselves and their families, their children and their animals and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to hear from people.
All the ways that you can reach Catherine will be in this podcast description. There will be links in there that you can just click on and go straight to her, and you guys can open up the conversation and start talking about it. You're extremely knowledgeable on all this stuff, and I think that the microbiome is like this frontier of knowledge, and I think that we're going to learn so much more about it in the coming years and decades. It's just fascinating stuff. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge. And I hope that people who need the help will reach out to you and get that help for themselves and start feeling better.
Yeah, me too. And thanks. And I agree. I love learning about the microbiome. I can't wait to learn more. We're learning more every day. It's super fascinating. And for your listeners, two of the best books I've read on this topic are Grain Brain. Grain Brain is by Dr. David Perlmutter. He's a neurologist, and Brain Maker is his second book about how our gut microbes really influence the health of our bodies and our brain. But those two books have been really influential in my learning about all of this and just his work in general. So those are two other resources.
Okay, cool.
But thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It was great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I found this old ad, and there's like dudes dressed up like construction workers, and a guy's got a jackhammer, and there's a crane, and they're moving all these big steel beams and stuff.
Aladdin Stanley Thermos. Stanley, the tough, all steel thermos bottle that's completely dependable.
They're showing this thermos like falling off this building and hitting all this other construction stuff.
And built to take a pounding year after year. Get the top one.
Oh, it lands in a wheelbarrow. The guy grabs it out of the wheelbarrow. Now he's going to pour himself a cup of coffee. I love these cheesy old ads. And most of the time, like, they're lying to us, right? That's most of what marketing used to be, was just like telling a lie, or at least telling a version of a lie that made you think that you needed this thing. But I'll tell you what, when it's cold out like it is right now, the only way to keep liquid and not freezing in your pack is by putting it in something that's insulated. So packing a thermos in the wintertime is really smart, whether it's for a hot beverage like coffee, or if you just want to bring some water with you, which is a really important thing if you're going to be out adventuring around in this snow that we've got all over the country. And I think you should be, because it's a great time of year to get out and about. This is both a comfort and a safety thing. If you want to get something from Stanley, which I encourage you to do, you can use the discount code 6RANCH. That's the number 6 in the word ranch, and that'll get you 25% off of just about anything on their website. I encourage you to do that. They're great supporters of the show and great supporters of this audience, and I love you guys. So stay warm out there, have a nice warm drink, and make sure you're drinking it out of a Stanley product. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast or me at Six Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.